Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. We really appreciate you spending a portion of your day with us to discuss this very important topic that we have in store. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is where do we stand as we are fighting these pandemics? And the pandemic that we're facing right now, COVID-19 hitting the world and hitting America right now in the deep south and out west in California and all the way up to Washington with surges and spikes is one thing that's very concerning right at the moment. But the one thing that I think that we can all say with certainty is that this is not going to wind up being the last pandemic for sure. And it's one of these situations that where perhaps if the authorities had been listening to people of science, scientists, engineers, policy makers in the space, maybe we'd be a little bit better prepared. And one of the areas where I think we are, and I've been doing some writing about this over the years and talking about this over the years, so I don't feel as if I'm a Johnny come lately to this particular topic we're talking about today. But it's this area of bacteria-resistant antibiotics, which is just scary like no other. I mean, because ever since we've had antibiotics, we've had the ability to go to the doctor, you feel really bad, they give you an antibiotic, and in a few days you feel better. And without the ability to have those kind of wonder drugs to fight bacteria, it can be a scary world. And we are seeing an increase in antibiotic resistant bacteria. And I'm not sure that this policymakers understand the importance of that. And I'm not understanding, I don't think that our patent and innovation policy is keeping up with this threat. And we're going to take a look at this space today, who's working in this space, the companies, their portfolios, and are we in a position to fight what we already are seeing is a real threat to the future? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So glad you can join us. So first bit of housekeeping measures, if we could go to the next slide, is everybody will wind up getting a copy of this presentation sent to you via email together with a recording of the webinar. You can access the presentation if you want right now, if you're listening to this on the computer, by clicking on the GoToWebinar control panel, the handouts tab, and downloading it to your computer. You can also, right under that tab, you'll see the questions area. You can send me a question and I'll integrate questions into the presentation as we're going through today. So now what I'd like to do is introduce our presenters. Our presenters today are from PatentSight, which is a LexisNexis company, and they're going to talk to us about their research in this space and what they have uncovered, and they've uncovered some really interesting insights. So with us today, we have Dr. Sharbani Chattopadhyay, and I hope I got that right. I was practicing that to make sure I got it right. I hope I did, Sharbani.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good
And
evening, everybody.
she's a consultant at PatentSight. And also we have Dr. Dirk Kaspari, and he's a senior consultant at PatentSight. And Dirk has joined us in the past. Sharbani is this is her maiden voyage, although she's joined us as an audience member on some of our webinars in the past. So let's take a pause here. And Sharbani and Dirk, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. And generally speaking, before we go through the slides that you both have prepared for us today, what is it that you would like people to have in mind about this big, broad topic, and at times a scary topic? Dirk, let's start with you.
Well, Gene, thank you. What I would like our audience to take away today is that even if we are busy with COVID-19, as you mentioned in your introduction, and our head is on a completely different topic, I find it, and this is what I want to show, it's a relief that others take care of other problems on the horizon, which we are maybe don't know about yet, or which we're ignoring. And it's comforting that someone is fighting fights we are not aware of right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Dirk. And Sharbani, your preliminary thoughts before we go to the substance and look at the slides.
I totally agree with what you and Dirk said about this. It's important that as we are fighting one pandemic, we have to keep in mind what other threats are there that are looming over us. And as Dirk said, it's comforting to know that the other fights are not forgotten. And what I would also like to mention here is if we need to know the direction in which we are fighting or our fight is directed to, maybe it's a good idea to look at the patents. So I think we are in the right space.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. And the one thing I would just say is that in some of the previous webinars that we've done, when we've looked at this, we've seen really, truly interesting insights, and I'm sure that we're going to see those here today. In the one that we did regarding a look at the antiviral landscape, you would have gotten a look at Moderna, for example, before anybody in the news had written about them and their vaccine trials and so forth. And then a few weeks after we did that webinar is when they started getting all their notoriety, and now in certain circles they've become a household name. So I suppose, Dirk, we're going to see some of that same kind of analysis here today. So why don't you just please take it away?
Yes, thanks, Gene. So to start off the webinar today, we will have to look back into history. Actually, it's 75 years ago when Alexander Fleming received his Nobel Prize for the discovery of the penicillin. And if we think of drug resistance with bacteria, we may think, oh yes, it's something new because we are using it too frequently in the last decades. But it's actually not true. He was even warning in his Nobel lecture that there will be a time when drugs may not work, or antibiotics will not work on bacteria anymore. And having this knowledge for 75 years, there are institutions and companies who are watching over this threat. And I just want to point out here the World Health Organization, because I will use some of their data later in the presentation. Actually, they are monitoring the developments. And what you see here are the two cover pages of recent reports from 2019 from the WHO. And this is good. It's good that there are companies and institutions who are watching over us, so to say. And when I say 75 years ago and the discovery of the penicillin, actually prior to the penicillin, there were alternative approach to treat bacterial infections. And today we are suffering from viruses. Back then, viruses or so-called bacteriophages were a treatment. So the phage therapy was in the 1910s, 20s was known. And bacteriophages are just viruses which are attacking specific bacteria. And if you see at the trend here of the portfolio size, and we show here active patents only because we use the reporting date concept, shows that the focus in the industry and R&D institution is definitely on antibiotics. And for that reason, we obviously focus on antibiotics because the alternative therapy had no chance after the discovery and further development of antibiotics. So, sorry, I was a little bit too quick. So what I want to point out here is over the last 20 years, we had a significant increase in the number of active patents for antibiotics. And if you look a little bit closer, you can see that the amount of patents has almost doubled since the year 2006. So I would say from this trend chart, yes, there's definitely a focus on antibiotics in the industry and R&D. And we can look a little bit closer, how do these active patents look like? So we can split it up in patents which are already in force and the pending patents. And what we also see is over the last 20 years, it is always the ratio between enforced and pending patents is hovering around 40%. So if I look at this, we see a high activity, increasing number of patents, and a good ratio between enforced and pending patents. So everything should look good. So we can go now to the big patent owners for antibiotics. And this is these are really the top 10 ones, but we have to keep in mind that the ownership of antibiotic patents is very, very fragmented. The vast majority of patent owners own only a few patents, and the top 10 own only about 6% of all patents. So you see, it is broadly spread among a lot of owners. So what we see here is we see a couple of companies. For example, we see here on the right-hand side, GlaxoSmithKline. We have Pfizer here in the middle. We have, for example, here, Boehringer Ingelheim. And here is a rather small dot. This is Roche. And what I did not tell you in the beginning is this is a look back in time. So this is the portfolio of these companies in 2009. And what I want to show you now is we skip forward 5 years. And what we see now is that, for example, GlaxoSmithKline has decreased its portfolio size. It's moved from around 600 down here to 350. At the same time, it was a more or less horizontal move. So on the y-axis, we have the competitive impact, which measures the average quality of a patent in a portfolio. So if we see GlaxoSmithKline moving horizontally from a large number of patents to a smaller number of patents, we can also see at the same time that the average quality of their portfolio did not change. However, this is not the same for everyone, because we had seen Pfizer here, they moved up a little bit, being now here right in the center of the other companies. And what you also will see is that Roche moved up, and they're essentially only moved up here. And if you go sorry, I want to add something. This little bubble here. So it was previously around 50. This is the Chinese Academy of Science. So they increased their portfolio size. And if we go one further, so now we are in 2019, 5 years again. And what we see is that Roche really skyrocketed. They went up. The same Pfizer here, the second bubble behind Roche. At the same time, GlaxoSmithKline coming from 600. They are slightly moving upwards, but not in the big picture. And at the same time, we see the Chinese Academy of Science. They did not improve the average quality over the last 5 years, but they increased their portfolio. So what we can take away here is that we see different trends for the big pharma companies in the area of antibiotic patents. So we have companies like Roche, Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Bayer, which have significantly reduced their portfolio, but at the same time, they improved the average quality of their patents. Then we have GlaxoSmithKline. They reduced their portfolio size, but they didn't change the quality. So they neither improved or decreased. And for the rest of the companies, they're moving around, making little changes, but nothing in the big picture. I don't want to call it stagnation because they are active, but from patent size and the average quality of the patents, we don't see much momentum there. Well, and there's a rest, I would call it, and not in a bad way, but it is Boehringer Ingelheim. So, and if you look at Boehringer Ingelheim, they came down here. And if you recall it, in 2009, they were at the top. So what we have seen here is that the average quality of Boehringer Ingelheim has decreased. And the other kind of outlier is the Chinese Academy of Science, because they dramatically increased their portfolio size with antibiotic patents. However, the quality, the average quality of their patents did not change. And I know in our webinars, we have often the question, so how do you measure your quality? And I would like to give a very, very brief overview about our valuation method. And if anyone is in the audience is interested to learn more about it, please feel free to contact us. We will gladly explain you the details. And there's also an IP Watchdog webinar where we explain it in detail, which you can watch as well. So we use two core metrics, which you find here in the center in the blue bubble. And it was our founder of our company, Niels Omland, who investigated in his university days, what are the factors for terminating the value of a patent. And he found that there are the forward citation and the geographic protection, which are the strongest indicator to determine the value of a patent. And these findings are the basis of our patent valuation metric, which with the measures of the technology relevance, which measures the forward citation with some corrections, and the market coverage as a measure for the geographic protection. And for example, we take corrections here considering the gross national income for the countries where patents are filed. So if you multiply these two measures, the technology relevance and the market coverage, you will obtain our value score, which we call the competitive impact. And this is a score for the value of a patent. And we multiply it because to reflect that you need a strong technology of an innovative patent, and you need the geographic protection to obtain real value for a patent. If either is missing, the value of the patent goes down. And our valuation method has been scientifically and industry proven and is used by a large number of companies worldwide and even public institutions like the European Commission. After this short excursion, I would like come back to our main topic. What you see here is the WHO, the World Health Organization's priority list of pathogens. And the number one pathogen is tuberculosis. It's killing 1.8 million people a year. And about 14% of the deaths are already related to drug-resistant tuberculosis strains. This is 250,000 every year. And for tuberculosis, we have already multi-drug resistances, which require, multi-drug resistances with second-line drugs, which is also not too good. And we have to keep in mind, as we are living with COVID-19 right now, tuberculosis is also airborne. And thus it makes infection control very difficult. This is just one outline of the priority. On the right-hand side, you see the other 12 pathogens. Among them are Salmonella and Staphylococcus aureus, which you may know, but there's no need to go into the details here for each pathogen. But what I wanted to show, it's a serious threat to us. To put it into a context, 1.8 million deaths per year is the equivalent of a major airplane crash every hour. And I think this illustrates really how important these topics are. So talking about tuberculosis, what we see here is the trend for the average quality of the patents, so the competitive impact for companies with tuberculosis antibiotic patents related to tuberculosis. And what we see here is which strikes first is there was a big rise between 2006 and around about 2016. And if you see this peak, please keep in mind, this is not the portfolio size, which is conventionally shown somewhere. Here we see the average quality of a patent. And actually, there is a very, very interesting question, because why is Roche falling off the cliff here in their average quality? And it's 2014, 2015, and then it's even going down. And there is a very, very interesting story behind this, which I learned from Shabani about this.
Yeah, this is actually something which is, I think, of relevance to all of us who work in the field of patents. And maybe this also tells us how patents also give us an idea about how the fields are developing, or how the fields get affected both. What happened was that around in 1950s, one of the drugs that are still very famous, the frontline drugs that are used for treatment of tuberculosis, is isoniazid. Isoniazid is not a new drug. It was there long back. What happened was that around 1950s, it was Roche and Squibb who were independently developing the same drug compound of isoniazid, which is actually the isonicotinazide derivative, and they were testing it on they were already in clinical trials and testing it on animals to find that whether they work well as an anti-tuberculosis drug or not. Coincidentally, at that time, even Bayer was doing the same kind of research here in Germany. What happened was that Squibb and Roche, they came to know about it, and they agreed to publish their results simultaneously together. And they did that. And what happened was they published their results in the American Review of Tuberculosis. But none of these companies could gain any kind of patent right on isoniazid. What happened was that it was found out that the patent right could not be given because isonicotinic acid hydrazide was already chemically synthesized long back. So these companies, without having any patent rights, went independently to market the drug into the different parts of the world. What happened was that there was a good media frenzy at that time. The drug was successful. And what we are discussing today, that relevance comes up because of late, it has been reported that isoniazid resistance has already developed among the tuberculosis causing bacteria. What happened was that the recent, and as you see that Dirk showed us, that the patent strength, the average quality of Roche came down recently. And what we know already recently is this isoniazid resistance of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis was obtained by the bacteria through resistant conferring mutations. And this brings us to another very interesting graph that you see here, that of Dana-Farber. And this is something which I think we should be proud of, that the pioneer work of the research work of few people that get this kind of a market reach and this kind of a breakthrough. It's Dr. Annie Goldfeld from Dana-Farber Cancer Research Institute, who has been working on the tumor necrosis factor, TNF factors, and she has studied it extensively in response to the infections by pathogens such as bacteria as well as virus. She already had published many papers, and she has also has brought in quite a bit of new insights about how this TNF factor can be used in regulating the infection in patients who are co-infected by AIDS and tuberculosis. We all know, or this is a known factor, that tuberculosis is one of the major causes of death in AIDS patients. What was found out was, she also found out that an FDA-approved anti-parasitic drug can inhibit the growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in human blood cells. This is the contribution of Dana-Farber in this research of tuberculosis, and this result contributes to this high spike that we see in this graph.
Wow, that's incredible. What I what I'm also surprised is that we see the story you just described, or it's more than a story. The reason for what we see here, that we really can reflect this on a patent level.
Exactly
and we can monitor actually what's happening in the industry and in the field of fighting tuberculosis. Which brings us to the next page. It's another journey through time. And this time we want to look at the companies who had recently new approved antibiotics against pathogens from the WHO priority list. And I will add the names to it on my last slide, because I would just want to show some first what is happening, because I don't want to point out the companies. I want to show what one company actually is really doing. And the picture looks similar to what we have seen before. We have on the right-hand side, we have a rather big player, despite now we are in the double-digit number of patents here on the right-hand side. And this is, again, the situation of 2009. So keep in mind, it's a journey back in time. We look at companies which had antibiotics with market authorization between June 2017 and September 2019. But we look, how did their portfolio, their active portfolio look like now 10 years ago? So, and if we jump forward into the year 2014, we see the big player here on the right-hand side has hardly moved. At the same time, we see a company coming down here, and this one has also slightly moving downwards in the average quality of their patents while increasing their portfolio size. But at the same time, we have two new entrants. We have one here and here. And if we keep those in mind, we can jump another 5 years forward. What you can see is one of them has really jumping up again, and the other one also moved upwards in the average quality. So something has happened with their active portfolio of these two owners. And to show what is behind that is, so Merck and Co. is the big player on the right-hand side. And we had seen in the beginning that the big trends for the big pharma companies is to reduce the portfolio size and increase the quality, or remain or stagnate with the quality, or just move a little bit around. And so Merck is apparently one of the companies who is slightly moving also in the area with the recently market authorization gained antibiotics. But what is more interesting are the two new entrants, and these were the Tetraphase Pharmaceuticals and the TB Alliance. So the TB Alliance, they got from Novartis in 2014 tuberculosis patents. And what is more interesting here is, if we add a little recent news, is that Melinta Therapeutics has acquired Tetraphase Pharmaceuticals. This was our new entrant in which we saw in 2014, and which then moved only upwards. So it became more and more relevant what they have. And Shabani has a very nice background information on this trend, which we found with patents analytics as well.
Yeah, what you see here are the companies which are right now currently in the news for all the right reasons. And as we discussed, that we are trying to get an idea about how the companies are trying to target the bacteria that have already developed multi-drug resistance. So here, when we look at it, it's like, and if you go have a look at the Dirk's presentation, you will see that he has already mentioned the drug compounds that are generally have a broad spectrum for treatment of bacterial infections. One of the drug compounds that are used in the broadest spectrum is carbapenem. And the multi-drug resistant bacteria have developed resistance against carbapenem drug compound through the enzymes that are called carbapenemase, And they also can act against the penicillin-like antibiotics that target the cell wall of the bacteria through enzymes like beta-lactamase. So these companies that we are looking at here, they must have done something that can help the drug compounds that they are working on to find another way of targeting these bacteria. Melinta Therapeutics that we have seen here, it's almost on the verge of bringing to the market a combination drug of carbapenem and beta-lactamase inhibitor. And what this particular combination does, it is that it has the ability still to act as a carbapenem. What it does, it attacks the bacterial cell wall, but it is not killed by the enzyme because it has a combination of beta-lactamase inhibitor. So Melinta Therapeutics is one of the companies that are right now in the front runners who are bringing these alternatives into the market, which can treat multi-drug resistant bacteria. Interestingly, Tetraphase Pharmaceuticals is not far behind. What they have done is they have also brought in one of the other drug compound, which is eravacycline, which they are supposed to bring as the drug named Xerava. This is the one which is going to target the bacterial ribosome instead of the known targeting of bacterial cell wall. Melinta Therapeutics now acquiring Tetraphase is that all the different approaches of targeting multi-drug resistant bacteria are now under Melinta Therapeutics. As Dirk talked about some of the other companies, we also have the latest news holder in this, which is Nabriva. Nabriva is actually a spin-off of Sandoz. They are supposed to bring a drug called Zenleta, which is the drug compound lefamulin, into the market. And what it does, it goes one step ahead, which affects the ribosome synthesis at the first place. So all these alternative targets of methods of targeting multi-drug resistant bacteria are now coming to the market. So maybe we see light in the horizon.
So may I ask then a quick question here? So I'm surprised that we see the companies out of the news are all rather small companies and not the big names, with the exception of Merck, which we see here. Is it a common approach now that pharmaceutical R&D is, at least for antibiotics, done by more smaller companies or spin-offs of the big pharmaceutical companies?
It seems so. It actually seems so. And what's surprising is, since we are discussing this, these pharma companies who are bringing innovation in a field where we require it the maximum, they are really struggling. Because as if I can give you the news of Aconian, you see it's ACA again here. It is supposed, it has already got an FDA approval for antibiotic, but it has already disclosed a bankruptcy because it doesn't have the money anymore to bring it to the market. This is something that is how it looks like. These small companies, they are doing great work, but they do need the money. And as we are discussing this, this is also something which can be of interest is in USA, there is a new act that has been brought in, which is the Developing an Innovative Strategy for Antimicrobial Resistant Microorganism, the DISARM Act of 2019. This is also brought in to promote these small companies so that they do not lose the battle that they are fighting so well.
Wow, this I can see this. As far as I know, it takes usually up to 20 years to make money out of a new drug. So I see why it is so hard for the small companies to survive two decades.
Absolutely.
Going forward, so
And another thing to say about those small companies is those are the ones that are willing to take the risk, because there's a lot of risk that goes into going down a new path of innovation. And as you say, that it can take so many years in order to see any fruit from the labor. And a lot of these larger companies are safely content to engage in research and development of drugs that they know are going to produce revenues in a much quicker time frame.
You're so right. And that's how we can see the picture right now. And that is what is also means this is not something we didn't know much about the pharma industry, but it is also time that we do recognize the importance of the small companies and importance of supporting them. Because as we all agree that it takes so many years to come to the verge of bringing a drug to the market. And then if they don't have the money to market it, it's sad, and not only for their part, it's a loss on our part also.
Yeah.
You're so right about it.
So then we have a second nice story here to show. So showing that even if the threat is there, we have solutions. So what we're looking here is, again, we're looking at the trend of the competitive impact, so the average quality of the patent portfolios for a couple of companies. And this time we analyzed the patents with respect to antibiotics against any pathogen from the WHO priority list. So we're looking, we looked earlier just at tuberculosis, now we are looking at everything. And as quickly, again, we see, for example, 2006, 2016, the Roche with their intermediate phase of increased quality. But for almost for every one company, the curve is more or less flat. And then, and this is so amazing, there is one company really skyrocketing since 2015. And this would be, if we do our analysis, this is a company which immediately sparks interest. And if you look into it, there is news about this company called Xeris Therapeutics. And I placed the call out with the pointing part to the point in time where we are today. And what we can see is there was a news release. And actually, Xeris Therapeutics has a new drug in a clinical phase 3 trial. And this works against CDI, which is one of the most frequent pathogens in hospitals. And the new drug is even considered by the FDA as a breakthrough therapy designation and orphan drug designation. So there's a lot of expectation on this new drug, and we can see it because the patents of Xeris, they really went up. And what I like in this trend is that you can, even if we know today is the announcement, they have been working on this for a couple of years with their clinical, with their development and clinical trials. But nonetheless, the patents already show much earlier that there is something of value in the portfolio of Xeris Therapeutics fighting the WHO priority pathogen list. And there's a lot of hope here. And I think this is what what I said in the beginning, we are under the threat of COVID-19 today, but companies are working on it and startups are working on it and spin-offs, and they take care that we are safe tomorrow. And we can track these innovations and developments by looking at patents, and we can work it out very easily, as you can see. And I don't know, Jean or Shabani, isn't this a great example of seeing innovation developing over time and easily spotting it?
Well, it certainly is. You know, we see this a lot with the analytics that you've brought to the table from PatentSight, where you can look at an area where you see a maze of companies that are all working on a similar problem, and then all of a sudden you see a breakout company. Now, there's a whole lot of different reasons why this is attractive, and this is why these kinds of data tools are, I think, just absolutely essential. And without knowing exactly who out of the registrants are on the webinar right now, and who I'm talking to, what I would say is, if I were chief patent counsel or chief intellectual property counsel, you have to have this kind of information, right? Because, or a member of the board, because if you are one of these other companies here and you see this kind of a takeoff, and you're a big company like Glaxo or Pfizer, in the news for quite a while, Pfizer was in the news for not having an awful lot of interesting stuff in their pipeline. These are opportunities to identify either partners or targets for acquisition, as we were talking about earlier on in the webinar, where that one company was acquired. And they also show you who is the competitors that you need to be worried about. And at the end of the day, you always have to, in the marketplace, know what your competitors are doing. Just to take an example that cuts across all industries and all technologies that everybody's going to be familiar with. The Beatles always knew who was also on the charts when they had a song on the charts and an album that was being released. And that's just good business. It's good business for musicians, and it's essential business for innovation companies. And I think all too frequently we live in our own siloed spaces and we don't think about it being a competition, but it really is, and particularly in the pharmaceutical area, where once you have a drug that's out there, and with the branding effect and the FDA allowances and so forth, you really get a leg up, the first one that gets out there. And then the other thing here too is, you look at, well, people are saying, well, orphan drug, we're not really interested in orphan drug status. We're not interested because that means that there's only 200,000 people that are affected by this. Don't forget that Gilead is now the talk of the town with an antiviral that failed.
So true.
It completely failed, and now it is saving people's lives in the COVID fight. So we always talk about, when you're talking to independent inventors, whatever you're working on, if it doesn't work, just have a shelf in your garage. Put it on your shelf. You never know when you're going to come back to it. You in the corporate world need to do that. And most famously in the corporate world, the biggest success where that happened, that we all would be familiar with, and we probably all have it within arm's reach right now, wherever you are, is a Post-it note. The reason that the Post-it note works is because Art Fry at 3M went and on his 20% free time was looking for something that he could use as a bookmarker in his church hymnal. And he needed to be able to peel it off and put it back on and change, the page and so forth without damaging the page. And he couldn't get the glue right. It was either not sticky enough or it was too sticky. So he sent out a company-wide email, and his co-inventor said, look, I got exactly what you're looking for on my shelf, and for my purposes, it was a total and complete failure, but it sounds like it's exactly what you need, and that became literally the billion-dollar invention. So you never know where these things are going to lead. And when you see a breakout like this, which increasingly with the data is so easy to identify, and I say easy to identify. It's easy to identify if it's there. And to cascade for a minute, and then I'll stop my rant, and I'd like to get your thoughts, Shivani. Thomas Edison famously said something to the effect that after he failed 2,000 times or 10,000 times, somebody said to him, well, that was a complete waste. You failed. And he said, no, it's not a failure. We now know 10,000 things that don't work. So all of these things really, really matter. And when you see this kind of breakout with success, those successes can be built on. And can you imagine taking this kind of success and pairing it with the shelf of Glaxo, or the shelf of failures at Pfizer, or the shelf of failures at Roche and Johnson & Johnson? I mean, these are things that really, really matter. And if you don't know that they exist, you can't do that. And if you don't look, you're not going to know. And if you look and you don't find it, well, then you knew that you looked and there was nothing there to find. So Sharbani, your thoughts?
I totally agree with you. And if I may add, since you mentioned Thomas Edison, if I may add the people in science, what we all believe is science is the biggest leveler. As you're mentioning, if you look at GSK, if you look at Pfizer, look at the amount of failures that they had compared to the amount of success, it will always outweigh. The failures are always much more. However, this is what we can see here. That is, a small company can also bring a breakthrough because science is not dependent on anything else except facts and figures and innovation. So, this is where we all can feel happy, proud that if given the right opportunity, science can take us forward. And as you correctly mentioned, a failure, it can be a failure for a particular purpose, but it can definitely be a success for something else. And if we have the data and the correct analysis options, we can always get something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we
And
have a question
yes.
here that says, isn't the problem with antibiotics that, a 2 to 3 week course cures it? It's not as profitable as a lifelong treatment. Because then if it's a lifelong treatment, then you have repeat customers. And, that certainly is true in one respect. With a lifetime ailment, you're going to have the repeat customers. And with certain of those, you can almost charge whatever you want, and people in pain are going to pay whatever and people who are, if they don't have the treatment and they're going to die, they're going to pay whatever they want. But for those kinds of things, a lot, there's only but so large a market. For antibiotics, everybody gets sick with some kind of bacterial ailment. Not everybody, but almost everybody gets sick within, every couple years, or sometimes people get sick every year, and you got to get antibiotics. So having better, stronger antibiotics, I think it's critical for society. And this is where I started. You know, maybe if it is less profitable, then we need to think about it from a policy standpoint. How do we make it more attractive to get more people engaged in this work? Because this is a real problem, because bacteria evolve.
Yeah, absolutely true. Bacteria evolving, and we are targeting multi-drug resistant bacteria here. And as you're saying, it's absolutely true because yeah, it can be not as profitable as anything else in the market. However, if we do not give the right kind of attention, it will lead to a pandemic, and then it will be like we are now we are just searching for a cure. It will again be the same thing, and that's where we need to maybe look beyond profit and look into the bigger picture maybe. Yeah.
Right. And Sharbani, with the,
May I add something here? So,
Mhm.
because
sure, go
you
ahead.
said 14 days treatment. So to put it into perspective, tuberculosis, the treatment takes about 6 months. And
Mhm.
this is a non-problematic one. The problematic ones, the therapies last for at least a year. And you have to take your medication on a very, very controlled schedule. So if you take the math and we just assume that we have 1.8 million potential, let's so call it now, customers. So it's 1.8 million times 6 months. Let's call it 3 doses a day. So it is scaling, and Shabani is right. We are facing the possibility of pandemics. So the number of potential clients or customers is going up. So it is not only the 14 days we usually see when we have a sinus infection or something like that.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and it becomes more
True.
and more complicated because we have
Yeah.
less and less drugs. And the cost of having no drugs will outweigh any costs for the development of new antibiotics.
Well, and that's exactly one of the things I wanted to follow up on. And Sharbani or Dirk, maybe you can comment on this. Is with these antibiotic-resistant bacteria, the if you get it, the outcome is catastrophic, and um, the death toll is extremely high, and right. I mean, that's my understanding, and we're not talking about like with COVID, or like depending upon the data, whether you include the Chinese data or not, you're talking about single digits or maybe low double digits, or now that it seems to maybe be weakening lethality, maybe that's going down to maybe 5-6% worldwide. You're talking about like 30, 40, 50% of people who get these things don't make it. Or if you get MRSA and they wind up literally cutting you away until you lose your foot, and then you lose your
Yep.
up to your ankle, up to your knee, and then you lose your leg, and then you lose your arm. I mean, they literally are hacking you away. I mean, that's what we're
Exactly.
talking about here, right?
Yeah, exactly so. So just think of the plight of the people who are actually infected and the drugs are not working. And there is nothing that even the doctors can do, the family can do. And that's frustrating and that's pathetic, right? And and if we don't take this into account and wait that it affects maximum of us, that may not be the right way to deal with it.
Hmm. Right.
Mm.
And we have
So,
to, and we're
and
thinking of cure if we are talking about
Yes.
antibiotics. So,
right.
and one common problem with the multi-resistant bugs is that we go into uncharted territories with the treatments. So we have to try new combinations and doses which were not tested before. And there are side effects, and there can be severe as well. So you have to make decisions. Do I want to take the side effects, or
Hmm.
Mm.
am I going to die from the
Right.
resistant bug?
Yeah,
And that's why some
absolutely.
of these technologies, where as I was sitting here listening, so look, I'm an electrical engineer. I know enough about biology and chemistry and biopharma to really be dangerous. So I write about it from a policy level. But when I was listening to you talk about, Sharbani, some of the technology involved,
Mm.
it sounded to me like, from when you talk about cutting away the membrane, or making it more
Mm.
porous, or however you described it, so that it
Mm.
can invade the
The
my,
bacterial cell,
my
yeah.
words, so the
Yeah.
bacteria cell, that kind of technological innovation, that sounds to me like it has greater applicability across the board, and is less, we're fighting this particular bacteria to try and just like take the biggest bat that we can find and whack it with the hardest antibiotic that we can find. It's much more surgical now.
Exactly so. And that's why kudos to these small companies who had the guts and, as you mentioned before, who had the courage to go into these uncharted territories, try this out, and then and it's definitely they're opening new avenues where the applicability can be then studied and taken forward to other areas also.
Yeah, and it almost feels like, and this is why I almost felt like I understood what you were saying,
Mm.
as as an electrical engineer,
Yes.
because in electrical engineering, it's heavy physics, right? And it feels like
Hmm.
there's there's this merging together of a biophysics that is being used to
Absolutely
fight
true.
the cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You're right. Yes.
Okay, so this, at some point, when you really look at these things at a more molecular, or like a nano kind of
Mm.
level, um, feels like we're making innovative progress that
Mm.
can apply across the board, which is why it feels to me like it's much more exciting than say, oh, well, this is just an orphan drug. It's only going to work on a. Well, you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere
Yeah.
to prove the
Yeah.
concept.
Exactly so. And and now we are entering into a field where these technological boundaries are now blurred. One technological field innovation can be applied in another, and that's the way we are moving forward. That's the way we will move forward. So that's the
Hmm.
way we should be. I totally agree with you when you said that you should have a grip on what's going on and have a idea about the current developments so that we know which direction we are heading to.
Right, right.
And to pick up
Now, Dirk, we
Gene's
had a
example,
question. Oh, can I just ask you, make sure, I want to
yes.
make sure we get this question in. It was answered privately, but I think it's a question others may have. And I want to ask you, Dirk, the analysis that you just walked us through for antibiotics, that can apply more generically across the board to other patents and other areas and other technologies, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And it's interesting because I wanted to comment on that. You said a few minutes ago, you were referring to the post-it solution and that someone was mailing internally, I have this problem, can someone help me? This company internal email is what we have shown here is our patent analytics, the advanced patents analytics. And we show here just one example. We can do it with any technology. If there is a patent, we can perform these analysis. And so you're not focused anymore on what you know, but you can chart the entire world of patents, any technology, any technology areas, companies, name it. We can analyze it and make the similar, even further analysis of what I've shown here today.
Okay. Great. So now, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure we got that particular question answered before the hour was up. So,
So maybe I can
go ahead.
add to it if someone is interested to learn more about the kind of analysis. We have upcoming seminars in September and October for our Virtual Innovation Analytics Academy seminars. And we would be happy to welcome you attending these web seminars so that you can learn more about our patent BI.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and I'll just throw this out there. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know, but after we did that antiviral thing, going back to the Moderna thing, I actually thought, Dirk, that maybe I should just buy some shares in Moderna, and and I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. And then, of course, within a couple weeks of us doing that and showing that, because they had that little dot, and it was so far high on the competitive scale, competitive impact, and then now they're showing their vaccine is showing all kinds of promise, and they're the talk of the town, and so these analytics can be used for a variety of different purposes. And I don't know, I'm a believer in them, as you can probably tell.
I can perform the advanced patent analytics. I'm not an investment advisor.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'm not, and if I had bought Moderna, it would have gone down anyway. I mean, the best advice that you're ever going to get is call me up and ask what I have bought and then short it. But the point is, and what I wanted to say is, there's all kinds of interesting insights here to be had that you can use. And it was interesting to see that, again, we had a company here that scored very high, and not surprisingly, another company that is in that space that did not score very highly decided to purchase that company. And well, why would they do that? Well, because they want the IP assets and the know-how and the trade secrets and all of the stuff that goes into the R&D.
Yep. So as we know that even PatentSight analytics tools are used for mergers and acquisition scouting and merger and acquisition target analysis. So at that time, the IP rights, and when you are trying to acquire a company or you're trying to sell off your company, it always gives you an added advantage if you have PatentSight with you, so that you can have a look at it, how you are faring at the average quality of the patents that you have.
Yeah. And Gene, you're right. You can use patents as a complement data set for investments decision. That's
and and the reason that particularly caught my attention was, I don't know how many of you all know the history of where IP Watchdog initially started. Back in the day when I first bought the domain name, it was going to be we were going to evaluate companies based on their intellectual property portfolios. And it didn't evolve in that direction, but who knows what the future will bring. So, but we're at the end of the hour, and I would like to one, thank you both for being with us, and two, thank the audience for being with us as well. But I'd like to give you, Sharbani and Dirk, an opportunity to give your parting thoughts. What is the one thing that you would like everybody to remember as they leave the webinar today? Let's start with you, Sharbani.
Um, I am a firm believer in science and in patents. I believe, and especially from the pharma perspective, I believe that the pharma companies need the support of patents because we already had discussed that the amount of effort, money, and R&D that goes into making a drug, and it most of the time it still can't pass through the clinical trials. So, and I as we started, I mentioned this, that if you're studying, if you're looking at the patents, you also get an idea, the direction which a particular technology is moving towards. There is nothing that can give you more faster information than patent applications and the documents. And especially for this field, as you saw, when we were looking at the companies, the small companies that we discussed here, they came up with the innovation that can change the way we treat these bacteria that have already acquired multi-drug resistance. So let's be hopeful, and let's acknowledge and keep working towards strengthening the patenting procedure and keep working towards it. That's what I believe.
That sounds great. Thank you, Sharbani.
Yeah.
Dirk, your final thoughts today.
In addition to what Shabani just said, I'm also amazed how you can monitor an entire field of innovation like antibiotics, but as other technologies as well, by looking at the trends in the patent world. So if you want to learn who are my competitors, who's performing better than I, who has probably an edge, or who's a new entrant into the race, you can very fast, as Shabani said, almost immediately find these information in advanced patent analytics. And despite the almost gloomy set we started off today, I'm comforted by the knowledge after this hour that yes, there are companies out there. There are small companies probably. There are startups, but they give everything to fight for new antibiotics. And from my perspective, it is great to have tools to easily identify these trends and single out companies which are of particular interest.
Yeah. I agree, and I really appreciate you both spending the hour with us here today, and I appreciate the audience being with us today. And I wish everybody a good rest of your day and a good weekend. And please check out some more PatentSight webinars when you have a chance, and there's some coming up here in the near future.
Yes.
So until
Yes.
then, stay well, everybody, stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. If before we end, just
Oh,
I
sure.
just like to, yeah, no problem. Before we end, we just like to point out that not only we have these webinars that are long, but we have small coffee break webinars which you can listen to, and we provide you with very interesting insights as we did today. And this may help you in getting an idea about the patent field, about the technological field, and probably assist you in making strategic decisions.
Great. That's awesome. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Sharbani.
Thank
You
you.
all take care. You have a good day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day as
Thank
well.
you.